The maitre d' looked him over once. That was all it took. One slow, deliberate look that started at the top of his head and ended somewhere around his shoes. And in the space of that single second, a decision was made that would cost 3 people their careers before the night was over. The man standing at the entrance of Solis, the most acclaimed fine dining restaurant in the city, was wearing a dark gray Henley clean dark jeans and a pair of simple leather shoes that were neither flashy nor worn. He was tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere in his early 40s, with close-cropped hair and the particular quality of stillness that came from a man who had long ago stopped needing rooms to notice him. Beside him stood his daughter, 9 years old, wearing a yellow dress she had chosen herself and had been talking about all week, her hair in careful braids that her father had spent 40 minutes getting right that morning because she had asked him to try and he had not wanted to let her down. Her name was Simone. His name was Aaron Briggs, and he had not made a reservation because he did not need to make a reservation at a restaurant he owned. The maitre d's name was Laurent. He was in his mid-40s, French by training and affectation, with the bearing of a man who had spent decades perfecting the particular art of making certain people feel immediately welcome and certain other people feel immediately aware that they were somewhere above their station. He had been at Solis for 6 years. He was very good at his job, in the way that people were good at jobs that required them to make fast judgments about people they had never met. He looked at Aaron Briggs and his 9-year-old daughter in her yellow dress, and he made his judgment in under 2 seconds. "Good evening," he said, in a tone that was technically polite and functionally discouraging. "Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" Aaron looked at him steadily. "No reservation," he said. "We were hoping you could accommodate us." Laurent's expression remained precisely calibrated. "I'm afraid we're fully committed this evening," he said. "Solis operates exclusively by reservation, and our waiting list for walk-in accommodation is quite substantial." He paused, and the pause was the most eloquent part of his response. "There are several wonderful restaurants in the neighborhood that may be better suited to your needs this evening. I'd be happy to suggest a few." He said this last part with a small incline of his head, the gesture of a man performing helpfulness while delivering its opposite. Simone looked up at her father. She had been holding his hand since they got out of the car, and she was still holding it now, and Aaron felt her fingers shift slightly in his grip, not tightening, just adjusting, the way a child adjusted when they sensed that something in the air had changed. Aaron looked at Laurent for a long moment. He did not look at him with anger. He looked at him with the specific quality of attention that meant he was seeing everything and deciding what to do with it. "I understand," Aaron said. His voice was entirely even. "Could I speak with your manager on duty?" Laurent's expression did not waver. "Of course," he said. "One moment." He turned and walked with measured steps back into the interior of the restaurant. And Aaron stood at the entrance with his daughter in her yellow dress and looked past Laurent into the dining room, at the low, warm lighting, and the white tablecloths, and the arrangement of flowers, at the host stand that he had personally approved 18 months ago when the interior designer had sent him 3 options, and asked him which felt right. That one, he had said, pointing at the arrangement with the white lilies and the deep green stems, because Simone's mother had loved white lilies, and he had wanted something of her in the room even if no one else would ever know it was there. He looked at those flowers now, from the entrance, where he had been told there was no room for him, and he felt something that was not quite sadness and not quite anger, but lived in the territory between them, a feeling he had learned to hold without letting it move him in directions that didn't serve anyone. "Daddy," Simone said quietly. He looked down at her. "Are we not going in?" she asked. There was no accusation in her voice. Just the honest question of a child who had been looking forward to this dinner since Tuesday and was trying to understand what was happening. Aaron crouched down to her level. He looked at her face, at the careful braids he had spent 40 minutes on, at the yellow dress she had chosen because it was her favorite, and tonight was a special occasion because it was the anniversary of the first dinner he had ever taken her to at a real restaurant. 4 years ago when she was 5, and he had cut her food into small pieces, and she had eaten with complete seriousness and declared it the best night of her life. He had been taking her to a nice dinner on this date every year since. This year she had asked, without prompting, if they could go somewhere really special. He had thought of Solace immediately, not because he owned it, but because the kitchen was doing the best work it had ever done, and he had wanted to see her face when the food arrived. "We're going in," he said. "Just give me a minute." She studied him with the clear-eyed assessment she brought to most things. Then she nodded, satisfied, and straightened the front of her yellow dress with both hands in a gesture so adult it made something move quietly in his chest. The manager appeared 2 minutes later. His name tag read Marcus, and he was in his early 30s, with the carefully assembled authority of someone who had been given responsibility recently enough that he still performed it visibly. He had been briefed by Laurent before coming to the entrance, which was evident in the fact that he arrived with his conclusion already prepared. "Good evening," Marcus said, positioning himself slightly in front of Laurent in the way that managers position themselves when they were there to reinforce rather than reconsider. "I understand you're looking for accommodation this evening. Unfortunately, as my colleague explained, we're fully booked. I'm afraid there's nothing I'm able to do for you tonight." Aaron straightened to his full height. He looked at Marcus with the same even attention he had given Laurent. "You have a table available," Aaron said. Not a question. Marcus's expression remained composed. "I assure you we don't. Every table has been reserved and our policy is." Aaron looked at him. "Table 12, he said, corner of the east wall. It's been held as a standing reservation under the name Briggs every Friday for the past 3 years. Check your system." Something moved through Marcus's expression, a small uncertainty that he covered quickly. "1 moment, he said. He went to the host stand. He looked at the screen. He looked at it for a longer time than a simple check required. Then he looked at Laurent, and the look between them was the look of two people whose story had just developed a complication neither of them had prepared for. Marcus came back to the entrance. He kept his voice professional, but something underneath it had shifted. He said, "That reservation is held for a private party, for Aaron Briggs," Aaron said. Marcus looked at him. He looked at him the way a man looked at a problem he had not expected to encounter and was not yet sure how to classify. "Are you Aaron Briggs?" Marcus asked. "I am," Aaron said. The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, Marcus was processing something that his training had not covered and his instincts had not predicted. He was looking at a man in a dark gray Henley and clean dark jeans who had just correctly identified a specific standing reservation at a restaurant that was not publicly known to have standing reservations, under a name that matched the name on the reservation, and who had done so without raising his voice or changing his expression. "Do you have any identification?" Marcus said. It was the last tool he had. Aaron reached into his pocket and produced a wallet. He took out a card and handed it over. It was not a driver's license. It was a matte black card with clean silver lettering that read, "Aaron Briggs, founder and CEO, Briggs Hospitality Group." Marcus looked at the card. He looked at it for a moment that was probably shorter than it felt. Then he looked up. The color had not left his face dramatically, the way it happened in stories. It left slowly, in degrees, as the full shape of what had happened assembled itself in his understanding. Solace was one of 7 restaurants in the Briggs Hospitality Group portfolio. The Briggs Hospitality Group had been founded 11 years ago by a man who had started with a single 40-seat restaurant in a neighborhood nobody was paying attention to yet, had built it into something people drove across the city for, and had then spent a decade acquiring and developing properties that were now among the most recognized dining destinations in the region. The group's portfolio had been valued the previous year at a number that appeared in business publications and which Marcus had, in fact, read about, because he followed the industry, and the Briggs Group was the kind of operation that people in the industry followed. He had read about Aaron Briggs. He had read his name in 3 separate articles in the past 18 months. He had simply never seen his face because Aaron Briggs did not give interviews, did not appear at industry events, and did not have a social media presence of any kind. He was, in the language of the business press, famously private. He was also, Marcus now understood with a clarity that arrived like cold water, standing at the entrance of his own restaurant in a dark gray Henley with his 9-year-old daughter in a yellow dress, having been told twice that there was no room for him. Laurent had gone very still at the host stand. Marcus opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Mr. Briggs," he said. His voice had lost its managed authority and become something simpler and younger underneath it. "I owe you an apology." Aaron looked at him. He said nothing, which was its own kind of response. "Please," Marcus said, "come in." He stepped back and gestured toward the interior with the movement of a man who understood that no gesture was adequate, but was making it anyway. Aaron looked at Simone. He held out his hand. She took it, and they walked through the entrance of Solis together. Past Laurent, who was standing with the specific stillness of a man who was not yet sure whether he still worked here, and into the warm, low light of the dining room. The room was beautiful. Aaron had not been here in 2 months, and in those 2 months, the kitchen team had made adjustments to the table settings that improved them in ways he noticed immediately. The spacing was better. The lighting over table 7 had been adjusted and now fell the way it was supposed to. The flowers at the center of the room were the white lilies with the deep green stems. Fresh and exactly right, a server named Elena, who had been at Solis since it opened and who recognized the owner of the restaurant the moment he walked through the door because she had met him twice during inspections and had a good memory for faces, moved toward them with the composed warmth of a professional who understood that the situation required grace rather than reaction. "Mr. Briggs," she said simply, "welcome." "And to you," she said to Simone, with a genuine smile. "That's a beautiful dress." Simone looked down at her dress and then up at Elena and said, "Thank you." "I picked it myself," Elena said. "I can tell. Only someone with real style picks yellow." Simone absorbed this information with the seriousness of someone filing it permanently. Elena led them to table 12, the corner table on the east wall, which had a view of the entire room and which Aaron had chosen when they were designing the layout because it was the table he would want if he were a guest, set slightly apart from the others, with enough quiet around it to have a real conversation. He held Simone's chair for her. She sat down and arranged herself and looked around the dining room with the deliberate attention of someone taking inventory. "It's really nice," she said. Her voice carried the specific register of a 9-year-old trying to be measured about something she was actually very impressed by. Aaron sat across from her. He looked at his daughter in the warm light of the room he had built, in her yellow dress with her careful braids, and felt the feeling that had no name settle quietly into his chest. "It is," he said. Elena brought menus and water and bread and explained the evening specials with the easy fluency of someone who genuinely loved the food she was describing, and Simone listened to every word with the focused attention she brought to things that interested her, which was most things. While Simone studied the menu with the seriousness of someone making a consequential decision, Aaron looked at the room. He looked at the tables and the people at them, and the servers moving between them and the particular quality of the atmosphere that happened when a room was working the way it was supposed to, when everything was calibrated correctly, and the result was something that felt effortless, even though nothing about it was. He had built this, not alone and not without difficulty, but the thing existed because he had decided it should and had worked in the direction of that decision for long enough that eventually it did. He thought about the first restaurant. The 40-seat place in the neighborhood nobody was paying attention to. He had been 30 years old, newly single, with a daughter who was not yet born and a business plan that his bank had declined twice before a third institution decided to take the risk. He had worked the floor himself for the first 8 months, hosting and serving and sometimes washing dishes when they were short-staffed, learning the restaurant from every angle because he believed that the only way to build something that worked was to understand it from the inside. He had not told people who he was when he came in to observe. He had sat at tables and eaten the food and watched how the room operated and taken notes on what was working and what wasn't, and gone back the next day with adjustments. He had been turned away from industry events because he didn't have the profile yet. He had been underestimated in meetings with suppliers and vendors and commercial landlords who looked at him and saw something other than what he was. He had absorbed all of it and used none of it as an excuse, because excuses were expensive, and he had learned early that the only currency that actually mattered was what you built. Simone looked up from the menu. "I want the pasta," she said, "and also the soup. Can I have both?" Aaron looked at his own menu. "You can have whatever you want," he said. "It's a special occasion." Simone looked at him. "What's the occasion?" He looked at her. "Same one it always is on this date," he said. "The first time I took you to a real dinner, 4 years ago." She thought about this. "I was 5, she said. "You were 5, he said. "You ate everything on the plate and then asked if you could have more bread." Simone smiled the smile she smiled when something pleased her and she was not trying to contain it. Then she went back to the menu with renewed purpose. Elena came back and took their order and withdrew with the efficient warmth. That was the signature of a server who understood her job as hospitality rather than transaction. Simone watched her go and then looked at her father and said, "She's really good at this." "She is," Aaron said. "Is this your restaurant?" Simone asked. The question landed with the casual directness that children brought to questions they had simply decided to ask. She had been looking around the room since they sat down, the way she looked at things when she was adding them up, and apparently she had arrived at a sum. Aaron looked at her. "What makes you ask that?" Simone considered. "The way that lady knew your name when we came in, and you knew about the table, and you were looking at everything like you were checking it." Aaron held his daughter's gaze for a moment. Then he said, "Yes, it's mine." Simone looked around the room again, slowly, with a new frame on what she was seeing. Then she looked back at her father. "All of it?" she said. "All of it," he said. She processed this with the thoroughness she brought to significant information. Then she said, "Is that why that man at the door was being weird?" Aaron looked at her. "That's part of it," he said. "What's the other part?" she asked. Aaron thought about how to answer that honestly, and in a way that was true without being more than she needed to carry right now. Sometimes people decide what something is before they've looked at it properly, he said. And when they do that, they miss things. Simone turned this over. "Like when I decided I didn't like tomatoes before I tried the roasted ones?" Something close to a smile moved through Aaron's expression. "Yeah," he said. "Like that. But worse," Simone said. "Because it was about you." Aaron looked at his daughter. He felt the specific quality of being understood by someone who loved him without any complication around it. 9 years old, and she had found the center of the thing in 2 sentences. "Yeah," he said. "A little worse than the tomatoes." Simone nodded with the gravity of someone filing a moral conclusion. Then she reached for a piece of bread and said, "I'm going to tell Ms. Patterson about this. She's always talking about assumptions." "Good," Aaron said. The food arrived in the particular sequence that Aaron had approved when he and the head chef had designed the menu together, and Simone approached each course with the combination of genuine appetite and careful attention that had been her style since she was old enough to hold a fork properly. She ate the soup with full concentration. She ate the pasta with commentary. She tried Aaron's dish when he offered and delivered her verdict with the specificity of someone whose opinions about food had been developing since age 5. "It's good," she said. "But mine is better." Aaron agreed that hers was better. She looked satisfied. Across the room, things had been happening that were invisible to Simone and only peripherally visible to Aaron. Laurent had been asked to step into the back office 20 minutes after Aaron and Simone were seated. The conversation there had been conducted by the general manager of Solis, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been called by Elena the moment Aaron walked through the door and had arrived from her home across the city in 35 minutes because when the founder of the company that employed her showed up at his own restaurant and was turned away at the door. 35 minutes was not fast enough, but was the best she could do. Patricia had managed Solis for 4 years. She had met Aaron Briggs 6 times. She knew his face, his standing reservation, and his habit of arriving unannounced in plain clothes to observe the operation. She also knew, the moment Elena's call described what had happened, exactly how serious it was and exactly what it required of her. She had spoken to Laurent first, then to Marcus. She had done it privately and without theater because the dining room was full of guests, and the priority was the room. And because Laurent and Marcus were not bad people, they were people who had made a specific kind of mistake that had a specific kind of name, and she intended to address it directly and completely and without softening it into something it wasn't. What she said to Laurent was this: "You looked at a man and a child and decided in 2 seconds who they were and what they deserved. You were wrong about both. You have been here 6 years, and in those 6 years this room has stood for something, and tonight you acted against it. I need you to understand that before we discuss anything else." Laurent had said he understood. Patricia had said she was not sure he did, but that she was going to give him the opportunity to prove it, and that the terms of that opportunity would be discussed tomorrow, and that tonight he would complete his shift professionally and correctly because the room needed him and the guests did not need to be part of this. Laurent had said yes. He had gone back to the host stand, and he had been impeccable for the rest of the evening. With the specific carefulness of a man performing a job he was no longer certain he still had. The conversation with Marcus had been shorter because Marcus had already understood more fully. He was younger, and the realization had hit him harder, and he had arrived at the back office already in the process of sitting with it. Patricia had told him, "You reinforced something you should have questioned." When you came to that entrance, you had time to look at the situation differently, and you chose the easier path. That matters. Marcus had said, "I know." Patricia had said, "Good, because knowing it is where it starts." After both conversations, she had gone to table 12 and introduced herself to Aaron with the professionalism of someone who was not going to make the situation more difficult by being emotional about it, and the straightforwardness of someone who was not going to pretend it was less serious than it was. "Mr. Briggs," she said, "I'm sorry for what happened at the entrance tonight. It should not have happened, and I take responsibility for the culture that allowed it to happen on my watch." Aaron looked at her. He said, "Sit down for a minute, Patricia." She sat. Simone looked at her with the assessment she applied to new adults. "This is my daughter," Aaron said. "Simone." Patricia said, "It's nice to meet you, Simone," Simone said. "Your restaurant is really good," Patricia said. "Thank you. That means a lot, especially tonight." Simone accepted this and returned to her pasta. Aaron looked at Patricia. He kept his voice low enough that it was just for the table. "I'm not here to make tonight a disaster," he said. "The room is full and the food is right, and the people at these tables are having a good time. That's what this place is supposed to do, and it's doing it." Patricia listened. "What happened at the door," Aaron continued, "is something that has to be addressed completely, not managed and not softened. I'll want a full account tomorrow, and I'll want to know what you think needs to change structurally, not just in terms of the individuals involved." Patricia said, "You'll have it." Aaron nodded. He looked at the room once more, at the tables and the people and the white lilies. Then he looked back at Patricia. "My wife used to say that the way a room made you feel when you walked in was either a promise or a warning," he said. "This room was built to be a promise. Tonight it wasn't. I need it to be again." Patricia held his gaze. "It will be," she said. He believed her, not because the words were easy to say, but because she had driven across the city in 35 minutes and had walked into 2 difficult conversations, without flinching, and had sat at this table and spoken directly about the thing that had happened rather than around it. Those were not the actions of someone managing a situation. Those were the actions of someone who understood what the situation actually was. Patricia excused herself and went back to the floor, and Aaron turned back to his daughter, who had finished her pasta and was now looking at the dessert menu with the expression of someone in the early stages of a significant decision. "What's good?" Simone asked, not looking up from the menu. Aaron thought about it. "The chocolate thing on the left," he said. "It's been on the menu since we opened, and it's never not been exactly right." Simone looked at it on the menu. Her lips moved slightly as she read the description. "I want that," she said. "Good choice," he said. She looked up at him with the sudden directness she brought to things she had been thinking about while appearing to think about something else. "Daddy," she said, "do you come here a lot?" Like, without me? He thought about how to answer honestly. Sometimes, he said. To check on things. Do they always know who you are? She asked. No, he said. Usually they don't. She considered this. So tonight was different. He looked at her. Tonight was different, he said. But the end was the same. She thought about this. The end where we got to eat? The end where we got to eat, he said. She seemed to find this satisfactory. She looked back at the dessert menu for a moment, and then she looked up again with the expression that meant she had one more question she had been holding. Are you going to fire them? She asked. Aaron looked at his daughter. He thought about Laurent at the host stand being impeccable for the rest of the evening. He thought about Marcus, who was young and had understood what he'd done and was going to have to sit with it.